Frostlich Jaina is a 1-star card.
Is a 2-star card.
Reno Jackson, a weak
Super
card.
Collider is a 2-star card.
The Moon Eater is a 2-star card. Frostlich Jaina is a 1-star card. Frostlich Jaina is a 1-star card. 1-star card.
Hey buddy, what's this?
1 star? I gave Frostless Jaina 1 star. I may never live that down, but it certainly won't be the last time I underrate some cards. And in fact, we're going to look at some underrated cards right now with some help from statistics from HS Replay. As always, let's go ahead and jump into the 5 most underrated cards of Rastakhan's Rumble. Starting off at the number 5 spot here, I have the Ornery Tortoise. And if you're wondering how these rankings were determined, there's more details in the description below. But essentially, we're going to be comparing the ranks of how people rated these cards from 1 to 5 stars based on the entire Hearthstone community, utilizing a couple different community resources, which are mentioned in the description below. And we're going to be comparing that rank to the played rank of the card on HS Replay. So how popular is that card in decks in Hearthstone in the last 7 days, determining a difference between those scores. So for instance, Ornery Tortoise was ranked 87th by the community, but when it comes to its played rate, it's actually 33rd for a difference of 54 spots. So it was 54 positions better than the community expected. Now, when it comes to Ornery Tortoise, it's still not being played a lot. Of course, 33rd in the scheme of Rastakhan's Rumble, a fairly moderately powered expansion or even weak expansion by some people's measures, means it's not seeing play in a lot of decks, but nonetheless, it's much more competitive than anyone expected and is certainly exceeding expectations, namely Ornery Tortoise being played in things like Mid-Range Hunter, but also popping into some odd Paladin and odd Rogue lists as well. Turns out that 5 health consistently compared to other options like Hinge-Clan Thug or Vicious Fledgling can just be better in certain metas or certain decks where you don't have to build up the minion. It's just good by default, and you certainly don't care about the 5 damage in most decks, although there are some things like Heal Paladin and maybe even occasionally Heal Zoo decks which are using Ornery Tortoise as well. So he's seeing just a little bit of play. Now, I gave this card 2 stars. I really think it is roughly a 2-star card. You could make an argument for 3. I don't think I was particularly wrong, but really didn't expect Ornery Tortoise to see quite as much play as it is. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we have Hakkar the Soul Flayer, and I'm thrilled to see this card on the list because I love Hakkar as a character. Glad he's being played, even if it's a little bit frustrating sometimes. The community ranked this one outside of the top 100, so one of the worst 33 cards or so according to the Hearthstone community, but it's being played inside the top 50 at 41st. Really only in some Hakkar Druid decks when it's not being summoned from Spiteful Summoners very occasionally. But there are some mill Druids out there that, you know, make you empty your deck and shuffle in a bunch of Bloods, and they beat you that way. And that's pretty cool, if not necessarily the most competitive deck out there. I gave Hakkar 2 stars myself. I, thought there was a glimmer of potential. I don't really know that this card's much beyond a 2-star card. I think you could argue 3 stars. It's definitely not like a 4-star card. It's just barely being played in a fringe deck. But nonetheless, it is playable. And a lot of people didn't think it would be. This guy was considered just too slow, too awkward, required too much setup, and although that's true, Druid can still occasionally make those sorts of things work. So Hakkar the Soul Flayer, actually I think a card to keep an eye on. There might be other ways to explore the power of this Death Rattle, giving you an alternate win condition, so there's some hope for Hakkar after all. Moving on to the number 3 spots, another card I gave 2 stars with Amani Warbear. But Amani Warbear is actually one of the most played cards in Rastakhan's Rumble, coming in at the 13th spot. The community only rated this guy an 83rd, so outside the top half of all cards. So a lot of people missed out on what made Amani Warbear good, including me. And that combination of Rush with the big stat line is just surprisingly good on its own. Like, I thought this card would feel bad to play and would only make sense in a deck that was supported by like Undasta or Hadronox, for instance. That's true. It's good in both of those scenarios, but it's also just good on its own. It often lines up. I've played a lot of Odd Warrior, and Amani Warbear often feels great just as a 7-mana play, and that's something I did not think would be possible. But Rush is so immediately impactful. That taunt hangs around, whether you're just playing it as kind of an Ancient of War light or you're taking that immediate trade. Amani Warbear feels good, and that's why it's being played in Odd Warrior, which is a very strong competitive deck right now, leading to this played rate. Up next at the number 2 spot, it's the Banana Buffoon, and the one card on this list maybe I sort of got right. The community ranked Banana Buffoon outside the top 100, although a little bit better than Hakkar, still considered a terrible card by everybody's measure. Despite that, Banana Buffoon is inside the top 30 for its played rate here. And it's being played namely in things like, buff-style priests, where the bananas make a lot of sense with Lyra and Radiant Elementals, and those extra stat lines go a long way. Also, it's empowered some versions of Quest Mage, which is not necessarily the most competitive deck, but still showcases exactly how good the bananas can be. And I did think there'd be some potential for this guy. I gave it 3 stars, which is much, much higher than the community ratings for the cards. I think I just recognize that anytime you're adding good things to your hand, even if you're sacrificing stats here a little bit, because of the synergies those bananas open up, as we see in the decks are being utilized in, that makes a card like this playable. It has that active effect that increases the value of other things so much that it's worth a little bit of a sacrifice. So I did think this card had some playability, and in fact, it's pretty much exactly the definition of a 3-star card in my mind. So one of the only ones on this list I got exactly right. But then right after it is the card I think I got exactly wrong. It's Baited Arrow, and although I gave this card 2 stars, which does mean it's, a fringe playable card, it's really like a 4-star card, 4.5, arguably even 5 stars, given its relevance in the Hearthstone meta right now. The second most played card in all of Rastakhan's Rumble. The community ranked it 89th, so that's an 87 rank difference. They also were very, very wrong on Baited Arrow. But specifically for me, I came out against this card a lot and kind of vocally often, and said I think it's really bad and it's being overrated by a lot of people. And even though the community didn't really overrate it in this case, I still came out strong against Baited Arrow, and it turns out I was very, very wrong. Maybe not 1-star Jaina wrong, but still pretty darn wrong. It turns out, a Bane of Doom that always summons a 5/5 works pretty well, especially in decks that utilize spell synergies like Spell Hunter, and especially with cards like Zul'jin that can recast this thing to great success. So yes, Baited Arrow is fantastic. One of the best cards in Rastakhan's Rumble, helps to shape the meta because of Hunter's dominance. Everybody got this one wrong, but I got this one especially wrong. This was officially, by the numbers, the most underrated card in all of Rastakhan's Rumble. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for the most underrated cards of Rastakhan's Rumble. I want to hear your thoughts on all these cards, so leave those in the comments below. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.